Hello, I am Jane Callahan, a member of the League of Women Voters Rochester. I would like to welcome all of you tonight, the candidates, the audience, and those viewing at a later time to this forum sponsored by the League of Women Voters Rochester. We'd also like to thank our generous partners of tonight's forum, the Rochester Post-Bulletin, the Rochester Area Chamber of Commerce, and the Rochester Public Library for their help. Due to the current pandemic, we are limiting attendees to the candidates and necessary volunteers. Guidelines for social distancing and the wearing of masks are also being followed. The League of Women Voters is a volunteer organization organized at the local, state, and national level to encourage citizens to participate in government. While we, as a league, do study and take stands on issues, we never endorse or support political parties or candidates. The views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates, not those of LWV Rochester or any partner or sponsor of this forum. And the sponsorship of the forum is not an endorsement of any candidate. It is our purpose in sponsoring this forum to provide you with an opportunity to hear candidates discuss face-to-face issues that are important to you. Tonight's questions have come from the LWV Rochester, the Post-Bulletin, the Chamber of Commerce, and members of the public. If you would like to submit questions for a future forum, visit our Facebook page, League of Women Voters Rochester, Minnesota, for information and deadline for submission. As there is never enough time to cover all the issues in a limited time and settings such as this, please feel free to contact the candidates' campaign headquarters directly if your questions are not addressed tonight. We'd like to thank all candidates for running for office, for offering to serve their community, and for the enormous time, dedication, and commitment that running and serving demand. We encourage our members as individuals, as we encourage each of you, our audience, to get involved in your community and the political party of your choice. Welcome to tonight's forum, which features the candidates for Minnesota House of Representatives, District 25B. Candidates for this seat are Kenneth Bush and Liz Bolton. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to offer an opening statement. The candidates will then respond in turn to questions provided by LWV Rochester, this evening's partners, and by the public, which were submitted in advance. Candidates will have 75 seconds for each answer. The candidates will then have 2 minutes to make closing statements. I would like to suggest to the candidates that you make your answer as succinct as possible. It isn't necessary to use the entire time for your answer, but please finish your sentence when your time is up. We would like to cover as many questions as possible. Each candidate also has 3 30-second rebuttal cards. These can be used at any point after each candidate has answered the question. Only 1 rebuttal card may be used per question. Please put the card in the basket after you have used it. The timekeeper tonight is League of Women Voters Rochester member Maggie Brimajoin. Questions from the public were checked to ensure they follow the guidelines of LWV Rochester by members Maggie Brimajoin, Jane Callahan, Deb Duffy-Smet, and Kathy Swessel. Asking questions will be Matt Stoley from the Post-Bulletin and Brent Ackerman from the Chamber of Commerce. Candidates, we will begin with opening statements, and candidate Bush, selected at random, will speak first.
Hello, thank you very much. I'd like to say thank you first and foremost to the League of Women Voters, to the Post-Bulletin, and to the Rochester Area Chamber of Commerce. My name is Kenneth Bush, and I grew up here in Rochester where my family's been for over 40 years. I'm someone that comes from humble beginnings, and I'm someone that wants to run for the state legislature to represent the citizens of my hometown. This is an honor to have this opportunity to bring people together, especially during these times of divide. I feel that my candidacy does that best. I was the endorsed candidate in 2018 where I received 7,452 votes against the two-term incumbent, Representative Salk. If you're out there, how are you doing, Representative? That's 40% of the vote. This time it's an open seat. Representative Salk is retiring. God bless him and his family. One of the main reasons I am running is to restore confidence in our legislature. That hasn't changed. Our citizens are feeling that there hasn't been enough transparency at the Capitol in St. Paul. And I feel that we are continuously being the highest taxed state in all aspects of our budgetary. And right now we're seeking a deficit, and we came out of a surplus prior to COVID. And we also are dealing with a major public safety and economic recovery issue. My background has been a business person in real estate and development for 20 years. I've been on the Planning Commission here in Rochester for 5 years, where I've served as chairman of the board, vice chairman, and as a representative on the Zoning Board of Adjustment. I've been in the housing development and realtor business for 20 years, so I understand the housing and homelessness issues of the day. And housing and homelessness also is a healthcare issue. I feel that we need to restore confidence, as I said previously, but we do need to have a representative that understands the struggles of everyday people. I have struggled and I've had successes, and I want to take those stories, those experiences, and bring your voice to the Capitol. Thank you.
Candidate Bolden.
I would also like to thank you to the host this evening, and thank you for everyone who is watching online from home and for being engaged in the process. My name is Liz Bolden, and I am running for the Minnesota House here in 25B. I'm a nurse and an educator and a mom of 3. I've lived in Rochester for 18 years, and I'm looking to use my voice, instead of being an advocate for patients and families like I've done for a long time, to be an advocate for all folks across the district here in Rochester. I have been advocating and organizing in the community for some time. I'm a former co-lead of the Rochester chapter of Moms Demand Action, which is a group who works to end gun violence. I currently sit on the community board of the Rochester YMCA. And last winter, I organized a fundraiser to erase the lunch debt for kids and families in Rochester. I strongly believe we need leaders who are making decisions with the best interest of all Minnesotans in mind. I believe that my background as a nurse and in healthcare will be valuable given our current challenges. I think we should have leaders who are making decisions based on science and data and evidence, and I'm not seeing enough of that. I'm running because I believe this is the most important election of my lifetime, and I need to be able to tell my 3 kids that I did everything I could to make the world a better place for them and to make Minnesota a better place for them. We have challenges ahead, to be sure, but I see that as a great opportunity to build a just and inclusive Minnesota where everyone is cared for and safe. Everyone has access to quality, affordable health care. Everyone has clean air to breathe and clean water to drink, and we are taking bold action on the climate crisis. That's the work that I want to do, and that's why I'm asking for your vote between now and November 3rd.
Thank you, candidates. We now turn to questions, and the first question will come from the public. This was submitted in advance, and it goes first to candidate Bolden and then candidate Bush. The question is, do you think there needs to be more workforce housing? If so, what do you see as a solution to this problem?
Yes, housing is an important issue in Rochester, and as I'm reaching out and talking to folks across the district, affordable housing is something that comes up often. And so, yes, I do think we need more workforce housing. I think we, at the state level, need to partner with local and county officials to decrease the barriers to development and work with community members and folks who are doing work in this area to find workable solutions for all. Everyone deserves to have a safe roof over their head and to be able to have a place to call home. And some folks in Rochester are feeling as though they are getting pushed out, and we want to have a safe and inclusive community where everyone can thrive.
Thank you. Candidate Bush, same question, and if you ever wish me to repeat a question, just ask. Candidate Bush.
So the question was, if I recall, do we need more workforce housing?
Correct.
Well, yes, 100%, and I know this area very well. I've served on the Housing Coalition for the Rochester Foundation. for quite some time, and I've been in the real estate development and construction business for 20 years. I currently serve on the board of the Rochester Area Builders, and so I'm constantly in communication with trades folks, the builders themselves, the developers themselves, the folks that are actually impacted to be able to bring affordable and workforce housing to folks. I think right now if we could reduce regulation on the building codes, that may be able to reduce, but also if we can decrease the area median income qualifications to 50 to 30% AMI, we should be able to create more housing. And I think that Rochester's done a great job. In fact, the state of Minnesota has done a great job at looking at solutions for affordable housing for over the past decade. But now with COVID, it's even more important than ever that we are able to provide housing and get folks off the street so they're not actually infecting others. They have a shelter over their heads. So yes.
Thank you, Candidate Bush. And this question comes to you first. It is from the League of Women Voters. Currently, under Minnesota law, when individuals are convicted of a felony, they do not have the right to vote until they are finished with parole or probation. If elected, would you support legislation to restore voting rights for individuals who are on parole or probation? Why or why not?
Yes, 100%. This is an issue that has affected the minority communities throughout our country for generations. And this is something that has been systemic. And I know folks that have been in the system that have changed their lives that can't get expungement because of certain financial obligations that they can't meet. I support programs like Damascus Way, Teen Challenge, Next Chapter Ministries, Damascus Way, Network for Life, all these programs here in Rochester, Teen Challenge. These are organizations that are helping to relieve some of those aspects and create a bigger picture with testimony of folks that actually have changed their lives. It's about redemption, restoration, and ultimately respect for your fellow man and woman. So thank you, yes.
Thank you. Candidate Bolden.
Yes, I do support that. I believe voting is a fundamental right, and everyone should have a voice. Everyone should be able to cast that vote. So yes, I would support that.
Thank you. We now turn for our next question to Matt Stoley of the Rochester Post-Bulletin.
Minnesota continues to have a persistent gap between white and minority students in terms of performance and graduation rates. Earlier this year, the retired Minnesota Supreme Court Justice and a Federal Reserve Bank President proposed a constitutional amendment to guarantee that all children have the right to a quality education. What areas would you propose, or what ideas would you propose in support to address the gap and improve education overall for all students?
This question goes to Candidate Bolden first.
Yes, and thank you for this question because it is an important one. We are seeing that across the state and also here in Rochester, that we are seeing significant disparities between white students and students of color. So some ways to address that, one is I think to just recognize it and then put resources into it. We need to have transparency in the process. We need to take a look at the school to prison pipeline. We need to, I support the concept of the wraparound schools or the full functioning schools to bring resources to students and parents. I think to take a step back as well, we need to be fully funding Minnesota schools, and that is something we have not done in a long time, and there are consequences to that. I have been talking to many teachers and parents across the district, and they are in an extremely difficult situation right now, especially with COVID and distance learning. So we need to be sure that teachers have the resources they need to do their jobs and to keep themselves and their students safe.
Thank you. Candidate Bush.
Could you ask the question again, please?
Yes, yes, please do.
So Minnesota continues to see a persistent gap between white and minority students in terms of performance and graduation rates. Not too long ago, a retired Minnesota Supreme Court Justice and a Federal Reserve Bank President proposed a constitutional amendment to guarantee that children the right to a quality education. What ideas would you propose to support to address the gap and improve education overall for students?
Thank you, Mr. Stoley. That's a great question. And speaking of the folks that you just mentioned, I did meet with former Supreme Court Justice Alan Page and Minneapolis Federal Reserve Bank Chairman Kaskari when they were here in Rochester speaking with a broad audience from all walks of life about the constitutional amendment. I liked their idea. Education Minnesota was in opposition of their idea. But doing more research, I find out that there may be more lawsuits against teachers themselves when the teachers themselves aren't necessarily at fault. We need to ask ourselves, and we need to be honest with asking ourselves, why do we have these disparities between black kids and white kids? I think that how we address that is continue to do what our school districts have been doing. I think that they've been trying their best with an open heart, an open dialogue to solve this issue here in Rochester. We need to pass the Increase of Teachers of Color Act at the Legislature, which did not go through because they're now still sinking into a fourth session. So if we can work on those things, work on more family value, more counseling, more transparency in this area, and continue to support programs like Boys and Girls Club. I have some family members who are great examples of community coming together to solve that gap.
Thank you. The next question comes from Brent Ackerman of the Rochester Chamber of Commerce.
As you know, the COVID-19 pandemic has severely impacted local small businesses across the state, including here in the Rochester area. What additional measures can and should the state take to help these businesses stabilize their operations and to recover?
Is that a question to me, sir?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Candidate Bush.
Thank you, Brent. I think that right now, businesses themselves, it's unfortunate that we have COVID, and that's no one's fault. But I think that we have done, from the chamber perspective, I think the chamber has done a great job with educating its members. There has been other organizations tied to the chamber, like Ready Inc., Downtown Alliance. I've been a part of the educational webinars. There's been a couple of private lawyers in town that have helped businesses on properly how to legally open up and things like that. I think the state could continue to help local chambers of commerce, local nonprofits, and local businesses come together, collaboratively and with a collective thought to find out what's best for everybody overall. So that would be something outside of more loan forgiveness and things like that. It certainly would help.
Thank you. Candidate Bolden.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. As you know, the COVID-19 pandemic has severely impacted local businesses across the state, including here in the Rochester area. What additional measures can and should the state take to help these businesses stabilize their operations and recover?
Thank you. So certainly we are in an emergency situation with a worldwide pandemic, and that has many consequences, and one of those is the effects on small businesses. And so I think there are things from a state perspective that we can do to support those businesses. I believe the role of government is to improve people's lives, and we should be supporting our communities and families and local business owners. I believe it's important to, with any situation, to create those solutions with the people closest to the problem as a part of that solution. So I am reaching out to speak with local business owners, and I think that is a key piece of this, is to hear from them, is what would be most important and useful for them. I think things like loan forgiveness and workforce development are pieces of those. And again, to take another step back, I think the most important thing we can do to help businesses is to follow the science and follow the recommendations that we know are helpful to stop the spread of COVID-19. So things like wearing a mask and keeping social distancing and not having large gatherings indoors. As much as we can prevent the spread and keep our numbers of COVID down, that is in the long run what is going to help businesses. So we can get through it and then help them recover on the other side.
Thank you. The next question goes first to you, Candidate Bolden. What should the state of Minnesota, should the state of Minnesota, this is from the public, should the state of Minnesota be doing more to protect the water quality in our lakes and rivers?
I would say yes. We need to be doing all we can to protect our natural resources, water being one of those. Again, as I mentioned in my opening statement, everyone needs clean water to drink and clean air to breathe. We are in a climate crisis. We need to be taking bold action on that, and protecting our natural resources and our water is certainly a piece of that, yes.
Thank you. Candidate Bush.
Sure. So a few months ago, I attended the Soil and Water Conservation District meeting and spoke with the Executive Director, Skip Langer, when we talked about the Zumbro River watershed and things like that. And as a Olmsted County Planning Commissioner, I've gotten to learn a little bit about our topography with the shale rock and things like that, and how water flows through our environments. I actually support their 2020 and 21 through 23 legislative agenda. I believe in clean and renewable energy, and clean water has a lot to do with that, clean air. But more importantly, we've got some infrastructure issues that, if you've seen Broadway downtown, we're actually redoing the infrastructure system here in Rochester so we can come about and have clean water. And then ultimately proposed, we've got a new water treatment plant that's going to happen here in Rochester. So ultimately, our energy and environment process in Rochester is kind of coming together as one, and it's looking pretty good. These are issues that that shouldn't be partisan. These are human being issues. So yes, I support clean water, clean air, clean energy.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you for your answer. This question is from the League of Women Voters. It goes to Candidate Bush first. Should the state take action to retain family-run farms and promote young farmers in Minnesota?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely, yes. And as a matter of fact, my colleague, Representative Nils Pearson, was the first author to actually bring about legislation to not only help young families, but to introduce minorities into the farming industry. And as the endorsed candidate for the Minnesota Farm Bureau, I support all aspects of family farming.
Thank you. Candidate Bolden, same question.
Absolutely. We should be doing all we can to support small family farms. That certainly is where our food comes from, and a great resource in our communities. They too oftentimes are feeling as though they are getting pushed out by giant corporation, big farms, which has ramifications certainly for the environment and those families as well. And so yes, we should absolutely be supporting small family farms.
Thank you. The next question goes to Candidate Bolden first, and it comes from Matt Stoley of the Rochester Post-Bulletin.
Last summer, the legislature passed and Governor Walz signed a package of police reforms. It included a ban on neck restraints like the one used on George Floyd before his death, and warrior-style police training. It included new accountability measures in the police arbitration process. My question is, are you satisfied with the package, or do you think more should be done?
I do think more should be done. I think what was passed is a good start. I will follow the lead of the People of Color and Indigenous Caucus, who has been leading the work on this for over a year. They had a package of bills that was weakened in the Senate before it was passed, and so certainly we have made some progress with this, but there is more to do. An example of that would be, in my view, making it easier, if you will, or making it a possibility to track infractions of police officers. So, for example, as a nurse, I carry a license. If I take actions that harm patients, there are consequences to that. If I take repeated actions that harm patients, I'm going to lose my job. And so it should be no different for police officers, that there should be a way to remove officers who are causing harm and having disciplinary infractions. We also need to track that, so that officer who has been removed with disciplinary infractions can't just move down the road or across the border to another state and serve in a police organization somewhere else.
Thank you. Candidate Bush.
I'd like for you to repeat the question, please.
Last summer, the legislature passed, and Governor Walz signed a package of police reforms. It included a ban on neck restraints like the one used on George Floyd before his death, and a warrior-style police training. It included new accountability measure in the police arbitration process. And so my question is, are you satisfied with the package, or do you think more should be done in the area of police reform?
Well, I did look at that, and I will say this, you know, it's unfortunate. I'm devastated by the killing of George Floyd, especially as a black man. That could have been me. But I'm going to go with what I know and with my upbringing here in Rochester and with what my experiences have been. I think that the legislature laid the groundwork. It's a start, but it's not the solution. We need to look at criminal justice reform as a whole. I want to read something to you. Every Minnesotan deserves to feel safe in their community and should be able to trust that they will be treated with respect and dignity when they interact with law enforcement. Proposals to defund or abolish the police are extreme, and that only makes our communities worse. I feel that I will have a platform to actually help solve these issues of police brutality, but I want to also look at this. There has been brutality against the police that has been disrespectful. And we just can't have that. When I'm out talking to neighbors, friends, and I'm in neighborhoods door knocking, public safety is an issue, and we all want to respect each other, but we just can't have rogue cops killing folks. And I will say for the record that I am endorsed by the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association, which is 10,000 officers and sheriffs. Thank you.
Okay, the next question goes to Candidate Bush. And it comes from Brent Ackerman of the Rochester Chamber of Commerce.
Sure.
The pandemic has led to millions of Americans losing their jobs across the country, including many here in our region. What steps must the state take to promote job creation and put thousands of Minnesotans back to work?
Well, I think that we, first of all, when COVID happened, we had a budget surplus announced in November of $1.3 million. Then in February, we had another forecast from the Budget Management Office that was $1.5 million. Going into this legislative session, whoever's elected, myself or Ms. Bolden, will have to make decisions of budget cuts, tax hikes, and all of the above. I think the state of Minnesota has done a good job getting us started with our economic recovery, but businesses need to have choices on whether they want to open up or not, and people need to have confidence that our legislature and our elected officials are taking them serious. I think Governor Walz did a good thing with the initial opening up, working with COVID with businesses and things like that. But he picked winners and losers when you had Costco and Walmart open, and then you had downtown Rochester shut down. A lot of those businesses aren't open back up, and that's across the country. But we have Mayo Clinics, so I'm going to put it in the hand of the medical community, but the government never solves financial problems. It's the private economy partnering with public, like government and nonprofit institutions. And that's how we make our ecosystem go round.
Thank you. Candidate Bolden.
Could you please repeat the question for me?
Sure. The pandemic has led to millions of Americans losing their jobs across the country, including many here in our region. What steps must the state take to promote job creation and put thousands of Minnesotans back to work?
Thank you for the question. What comes to mind first with this is a bonding bill. I think we are seeing that also goes for infrastructure, but it also goes for job creation. There is work to be done in our state, and we need to work on roads and bridges, and that means jobs for folks. And so right now, you're exactly correct. We are seeing a loss of jobs due to a pandemic. And we need to get through this. We need to support people so they can continue to take care of their families, and while we can keep everyone safe. And on the other side of this, we need to be sure that people can get back to work.
Thank you. And the next question comes from the public, and it's for you first, Candidate Bolden. Should Minnesota restrict the sales of flavored tobacco products to protect kids from addiction? And what else do you think we could be doing to address the problem of flavored tobacco products?
Yes, I think this is a great question. So my answer is yes, I do think we should be banning flavored tobacco products, because those are, they're marketed at kids, and kids are the ones who are getting their hands on them and becoming addicted, and it is having significant health impacts for children. We need to be protecting the safety and health of our children, and so yes, I believe we need to take action on that.
Thank you. Candidate Bush.
Question again, please.
Yes. Should Minnesota restrict the sales of flavored tobacco products to protect kids from addiction? And what else do you think we could be doing to address the problem of flavored tobacco products?
Well, first and foremost, the answer to that question is yes. Because I feel like it's specifically targeted to little kids that look just like me. But it's actually expanded to the suburbs. I remember they started out as menthol. It's disgusting. So yes.
Thank you for your answer. And now a question from the League of Women Voters, going first to Candidate Bush. Should Minnesota have a $15 minimum wage?
That's a great question. 2 years ago when I ran against Dwayne Salk, I would have said no. Now with COVID, I am open to looking at it, but it can't be necessarily mandated by the government. At the end of the day, government cannot mandate a private employer to pay a certain wage. We all know that we need workable wages. Everybody does, especially the folks that are in the support professionals that are working with disabilities. Programs like Hiawatha Homes and direct support professionals making $12 an hour. Those folks should be making $20, $30 an hour. So that would be my answer. So I'm open to it because there are some disparities that need to be seriously looked at.
Thank you. Candidate Bolden.
Yes, I would be in support of raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. We need to be sure that families have the ability to take care of their families. We need a living wage for folks. And, I'm talking to people across the district who are working, 2 jobs and still not making ends meet. And it shouldn't be that way. We need to be sure that people have what they need to take care of their families. And that includes health care and benefits. So yes, I would support a minimum wage of $15.
Thank you. Now this next question goes first to Candidate Bolden, and it's from Matt Stoley of the Rochester Post-Bulletin.
So to follow up on this whole issue of tobacco products, do you support the legalization of marijuana for recreational purposes?
Yes, I do, for a couple of reasons. And let me preface it by saying I don't think it's something that we can just do tomorrow. I think it needs to be done safely and carefully and thoughtfully. However, I do because for a few reasons. One is there are known racial disparities with our process for that right now as we look at the legalization of alcohol versus cannabis. Another reason is it is working well in other states. It's not like we would be the first ones to do it, and it is widely supported by Minnesotans as a whole. And last thing I would add is the economic impact of that is there are opportunities economically for our state, and that should be that money should be targeted for I would say for health purposes, to put that money towards the health and safety of Minnesotans.
Candidate Bush.
No. I just listened to candidate Liz Bolden say that cannabis should be recreational, legalized here in Minnesota, with the proceeds going to the health and safety of our communities. I beg to differ. You know, I understand it, and I concur with you, Candidate Bolden, in reference to the disparities between white guys, you know, and minorities getting pulled over with a joint. There could be some disparities, but I don't know of them because I haven't personally had the experience of being in trouble that way. But I do feel that folks that I talk to, from a medical perspective, I talked to someone whose child has autism, and believe it or not, that apparently helped her child. From personal experience, I think that it can be a gateway drug, and I'm not going to support legalized marijuana, especially when drugs are coming from Mexico and everywhere else laced with other drugs. And the mental capacity of the ramifications of that is suicide, depression, and everything else. So I don't support legalized weed, no.
Thank you. Yes, oh, rebuttal?
I
30
just-
seconds.
Yes, I would just follow up on that in terms of, you know, a concern of drugs being laced with other things. An advantage of legalization is regulation, and so there could be parameters and regulation of that versus right now it's wide open.
Thank you. The next question goes first to Candidate Bush, and it is from the public. Do you support ranked choice voting, and why? Will you support the ranked choice voting local options bill, which will allow even-year election cities like Rochester to adopt ranked choice voting for municipal elections?
That's a great question. Hi, Ann Froelich, if you're watching right now. I know that we talked a little bit about that. Also, I spoke with Vanjie Castro, former council president candidate. I don't know very much about ranked choice voting. I do know that right now with COVID, we've got, you know, mail-in voting and folks receiving 2 and 3 ballots. Some folks receiving ballots at their in-laws' house with their maiden name on it. I think ranked choice voting, with all of this going on, and we don't know if this is going to be 1 year, 2 year, 5 years, it just may be too much for everyone, especially when you're not going to the polls as much. I do think, though, and I do believe that, from what I've heard, this does help narrow the gap for other folks from underrepresented groups to actually get involved in this process and gives folks more choice. I'm open to looking at it, but right now I would say that I do not support it. Especially if it's state mandated, it's a little bit different than if it's locally mandated. I'm open to learning more.
Thank you. Candidate Bolden.
I do support ranked choice voting, and I support communities to determine if and when it is right for them. There are currently 3 cities in Minnesota who utilize ranked choice voting. I support it because it allows for the candidate with the most broad support to get elected. It decreases some of the negative campaigning that can occur because candidates need to connect and would like to be, if they can't be their first choice, they would still like to be their second choice. And it does allow for more diversity and inclusion within the process. And so it expands democracy. It puts more power in the hands of the voters, which is exactly where it should be. And I also would just like to emphasize that we have a very safe and secure voting process and system in Minnesota. And so I do not have concerns with that. And certainly our Secretary of State is leading a very safe process to allow everyone to have a voice and to vote. In a pandemic, there's many safe ways to vote right now.
Thank you. The next question is for Candidate Bolden, and it's from the League of Women Voters. How would you improve relationships with local governments?
Yes, that's a great question. I think relationships is the key to getting things done. And so that is, as I look at it, all of this is about relationships. It's about relationships with the community. It's about relationships as legislators with local officials. I think that part of that is listening and hearing what the needs are. I think it is realizing, setting aside differences and realizing what we're focused on, which is the community and families and working families and people of the district. And so I look forward, I am willing to work with anyone who is willing to work with me to get the work done. I am about action and getting things done. And so I look forward to continuing to build partnerships with folks across the district.
Candidate Bush.
Could you ask the question again, please?
Yes. The question from the League of Women Voters. How would you improve relationships with local governments?
Sure. Yes, action does speak louder than words. And over these years, I've attended hundreds of city council meetings, planning meetings, county board meetings, roll call meetings, which is actually the Council of Olmsted County Council of Governments, which is actually representatives from the city, representatives from the county, and even a citizen representative. And I think right now we've got one citizen representative on there, two of them actually. You know, I think what I have heard and what I've seen is folks wanting to come together and work together here for the betterment of our community. I know that there has been some talk that our county and city council haven't been able to get along at times, and either of those parties have had a positive relationship with their legislature. They feel that they're all in their own silos. My experience with watching all of those meetings, paying attention to the characters that are there, listening and finding out more about the personalities and sinking mine in there and being a part of that already prior to not even being elected, it will be easier for me to actually continue to build the relationships that I already have. I know the characters, I know the players, and I want to continue to create solutions on behalf of the citizens of Rochester and state of Minnesota.
Thank you. The next question is from the public, and we start with candidate Bush. Are counties currently underfunded regarding the mandated obligations to provide human services for families and children in distress?
You want to know something? I don't know everything about county COVID funding because this comes from the state and from the Fed. And I think right now we are underfunded in some areas. Those areas include going into a winter season with COVID. So we need to bring together resources. As long as it's transparent, I'm all in on making sure that our community has the best outcome at this time.
Thank you. Candidate Bolden.
Can you please repeat the question for me?
Yes. Are counties currently underfunded regarding the mandated obligations to provide human services for families and children in distress?
Thank you for that question. So that is something I'm looking forward to learning more about. I do not, I'll be very honest, I don't know the specifics of the dollars and cents funding to those organizations, to the county. But what I will say is this: we need to be sure our families in need have what they need and have access to resources. And so again, I think this comes back to finding solutions with people at the center and listening to people who are most closely affected to issues to determine what the solutions should be. And I would imagine that perhaps if you would ask some of those families who are needing to access those resources currently, given our current state and competing resources, that they might say they did not have enough funding, and I look forward to learning more about that.
Thank you. Candidate Bush. Oh, you already answered that. I'm getting ahead of myself here. So a question from the League of Women Voters to candidate Bolden, who just spoke. How do you see the state generating the needed revenue to repair and replace our roads?
Yes, so that's a great question, and that certainly is needed. And I'm going to again put in another plug for a bonding bill. We need to get a bonding bill done for our infrastructure, bridges and roads, to be sure that our community has what it needs for everyone to be safe. And again, with that comes jobs, which are also needed. Whoever is elected and in the legislature in the next session is going to have a large challenge ahead in terms of the budget. We need to balance how do we invest in our communities and support our communities. I think there are things to look at with that in terms of taxes and going through every budget with a fine-tooth comb to see where can we create efficiencies in terms of large corporations and taxes, making sure that they are paying their fair share, just like you and I are paying our fair share. And I think it's really important to be sure that we are not cutting what is absolutely necessary to be sure that families can take care of themselves and each other. Thank you.
Candidate Bush,
Could you repeat the question again, please?
how do you see the state generating the needed revenue to repair and replace our roads?
Oh, sure. Just like I repeated in my opening statement, I believe, I'm on the board of the Rochester Area Builders, and so of course we need a bonding bill. And one of my colleagues and friend is Senator Dave Sengen, who's actually chairman of the Capital Investment Committee. He's very instrumental in teaching me and others about the process of bonding. And right now, we're all a little bit disappointed that our House and Senate can't come together and actually get this deal done. And it's basically based on personalities. We've got a governor that hasn't included the legislature in this process. And so, you know, guys are hurting in the trades, electricians, plumbers, you know, builders, developers are all hurting. And that actually in turn turns to our citizens not having an affordable place to live. I think that right now we need to focus on reducing waste and fraud. A couple of years ago out of Health and Human Services, there was $500 million in waste and fraud. If we can reconcile some of the things that are in our budget that are actually not returning, making a return for the taxpayers, then we should be able to actually have an increase in our revenue.
Thank you, and now we'll have the last question from the public, who I think want to get to meet you both a little more with this question, and then we'll turn to closing arguments. First to Candidate Bush. What do you think will be the most challenging aspect of being a member of the legislature?
That's a great question. Whoever you are that asked that question in the audience, thank you. I think the biggest challenge right now is bringing people together. We've got a legislature, whether it be Democrat or Republican. I'm someone that wants to work across the aisle. I'm not beholden to party bosses. I'm not beholden to lobbyists. I think that coming together as people, that's going to be the most important thing right now, because we've got so many different opinions of whether you should wear a mask, whether COVID's a hoax, it's someone's fault that my business is failing, and all these different types of things. Public safety is an issue along with our economy. Right now, the best thing that I can do is utilize the relationships that I got there, my networking and communication skills. The number one thing for a freshman legislature is to listen and learn and take suggestions, thoughts, questions, and concerns from your constituency to the Capitol, and you utilize the network, the committees, the leadership, and you figure out solutions that are for the betterment of all.
Thank you. Candidate Bolden.
So I think this is a great question, and one that can maybe help folks get to know us a little bit better, as you said. So I think in my mind, the biggest challenge coming up is going to be certainly the pandemic. We're in a worldwide pandemic. There is no playbook for that. And so how do we balance the health and safety of Minnesotans, which needs to come first, right? We need to be sure that everyone is cared for and safe, and that we are following the science and data and evidence to make decisions. It's not about opinions of does a mask work, it's do we follow the science that it does. And how do we balance that with making sure that our communities are cared for and the economic impact of that, because there absolutely is an economic impact to that. And you have to balance those issues and take them together. And so I think the biggest challenge is going to be how do we get through this? How do we support communities and make decisions to support working families to be sure that we can get through the pandemic and come through it on the other side and rebuild and be sure that we can have communities and families that are safe and cared for.
Thank you, candidates. This concludes the questions portion of our forum. We will now hear your closing statements. They will be 2 minutes long, and we will start with candidate Bolden.
So again, I would just say thank you to the hosts and to everybody watching at home. If your question did not get answered here today, please feel free to reach out to me. I would love to connect with you if I have not already. I would say that every job I've ever had has been caring for people in one way or another. When I was 16, I worked as a CNA in a long-term care facility, which was very hard work, but I learned a lot and I loved it, and that led to my becoming a nurse. Most of my time as a nurse was in the neuro ICU, where I learned to collaborate and work with others and think on my feet and deal with really challenging situations. I then moved into education, where now I lead teams of educators and my staff teach new staff in hospital critical care settings. And so I view this role, the role as of a legislator, as an extension of that, of making sure that the community is cared for and folks all across the district are safe and cared for. I think, as I mentioned before, we have challenges ahead of us, but I see this as an opportunity to build a just and inclusive Minnesota that works for everybody, where everyone is cared for and safe, where everyone has the opportunity to thrive, regardless of what they look like or where they live or who they love. I believe my experience will be valuable given our current challenges. And I, again, would say there's a lot to be worried about, but there's also a lot to be hopeful about. I am hopeful that we can build that just and inclusive Minnesota. That's the work I want to do. That's why I'm running, and that's why I'm asking for your vote between now and November 3rd.
Thank you. Candidate Bush, your closing statement.
Thank you. Like I said, my name is Kenneth Bush. I appreciated the cordial conversations tonight, candidate Bolden and panelists. I feel that I'm the best candidate for this race here in 2020. We talk about diversity, we talk about inclusion. I actually live it, so I don't talk about it as much because I actually am performing the real life action of trying to give people hope, trying to bring people together. I come from humble beginnings. I'm the youngest out of 11 kids. And I've been in Rochester my whole life. My mother's 86 years old, born on a plantation in Mississippi. It's a miracle that I stand here today because this is against all odds. But it's the second time that I've been endorsed by the citizens and friends, supporters of my hometown. I have an educational experience from the University of St. Thomas, went to grad school at Hamline University for economic development, so I understand these issues. I've served in many capacities here in Rochester, serving on public boards, private boards, nonprofit boards. I have experience with working with folks that are homeless, working with the business community, working with folks that actually want a second chance at life. I myself have had a second chance at life, and I've been so blessed to have this opportunity to represent and talk to friends and neighbors every day in all the neighborhoods that I know in Rochester, and the support for my campaign is just fantastic. I think right now the racial divide that we have going on in our country is a travesty, and I ran before on my own merit. I'm running again on my own merit, and I hope that folks can see that they've got a strong African American here in Rochester that sees himself as a strong Minnesotan that thinks that he can give hope, that will give hope to others and pay it forward and bring them along the way with my life's experiences and my network. So thank you.
Thank you, candidates, for your closing remarks. I would like to thank each of you for participating in tonight's forum. Thank you for your service to the community and for your willingness to be part of the democratic process by running for office. I would like to remind you, the viewers, that the views expressed in the forum tonight were those of the candidates, not those of LWV Rochester or any partner or sponsor of the forum. Thanks to our partners, the Rochester Area Chamber of Commerce, the Rochester Post-Bulletin, and the Rochester Public Library. Remember that Election Day is November 3rd, and that early voting has already started. If you have voted by absentee ballot and would like to change your ballot based on what you learned tonight, visit mnvotes.org, that's mnvotes.org, for more information on the process. Please remember to vote. If you have a question about your polling place or you would like to see a sample ballot, visit vote411.org. That's VOTE411.org. To see this forum again, access the forums from the Rochester Public Library website. Good night, everybody.